What's up, everyone? This is Peter Moller here. In this take, I'm gonna do a basic breakdown about this book here, an account of the Antiquities of the Indians, and this is the English translation of the work that was done by the late Juan Arrom. Now, when it comes to this book, it gives one of the first insight into the world view of that paradigm of the Taino social hierarchy, as we have come to learn and understand of the island of Ati/Ischia, which the Spaniards had by that time already renamed Hispaniola. So this is one of the founding books. So what I'm going to do today is give a basic breakdown in concerns of this important document of study. I won't go too in depth because I already have done a lot of videos covering this, but this is just going to be a basic one which will help people in their own studies, okay? For one, to begin with, the original that was composed by Ramon Pane was lost. So what this book is based off of is the translation that was composed and copied down by Alfonso de Ula. Okay, so this is what this book is based off of. Now, what the late Juan Arrom did, comparing texts from Bartolome Columbus, Las Casas, and also Peter Montier, was to make sense of that text, because Alfonso de Ula's Italian translation had many errors. Many of the principal names of the Taino gods, they were corrupted. So it was a tremendous task for the late Juan Arrom to translate that Italian text. So what he has done was to make it comprehensible. There has been other people like Sebastian Robio Lamanche who has also contributed in making this text comprehensible in the form of a fictional narrative. Now, one of the best ways to understand what is composed here is by comparing, when you compare most of the stuff that was put together here, accredited to Ramon Pane, when you compare the religiosity and other aspects that concerns that worldview, when you compare with other out-of-whack narratives, you see that there's a lot of relationships. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into this, and hopefully this will give people a better understanding in how to engage studying an account of the Antiquities of the Indians. So I'm going to read some points from Arrom's introduction to this. As a reporter, Ramon Pane noted down the names, functions, and attributes of the Taino gods, and he recounted the people's beliefs about what became of their souls after death. He described the ceremonies of the priests or the Behiques and the cures they performed. He collected the myths they told him about the origin of the sun and the moon, the creation of the sea and the fishes, and the appearance of man on the island, and the cultivation and consumption of cassava. Okay, so in my opinion, Jerry Roman probably gives the best example in concerns of this. What these accounts breaks down of tribal fissure and separation, meaning the genesis of Taino culture and society as it emerged on the islands, most specifically in concerns of ID/Giscaya. We know from this, Ramon Pane was commissioned by Columbus to learn of the beliefs of the natives of the island of that era. First, Ramon Pane knew of Macoris, of the classic Taino. He knew the Littlers. Sometime later, he moved on to live with Warionesh, which is where he spent some time to learn about the beliefs. So we're going to get into more points. Arrom says he arises a doubt to resolve regarding both the form and the time from Pane's report to Columbus. It must have been during his stay in Warionesh's territory, between the spring of 1495 and the spring of 1496, that Pane had gathered information in regards to the Taino beliefs that he recorded in the first 21 to 26 chapter of his account. Now, from this here, the trajectory of the manuscript after 1498 has been even more difficult to determine, Arrom writes. Columbus returned to Hispaniola in August 1498 and remained there until August 1500. So one may suppose that Fray Ramon would have hastened to finish his report in order to deliver it to the admiral at that moment. In this case, it would have been the admiral himself who took it to Spain on the return from his third voyage. This conjecture agrees with the fact that although he does not mention the existence of the manuscript before 1499, Angahira, Peter Montier, does give evidence that he handled the manuscript between 1500 and 1504. Between 1500 and 1504. In fact, the strange document so awakened his interest that he included it, this time explicitly indicating its source and including several Taino names in an extensive letter in Latin to Cardinal Ludovico de Aragon. The letter became part of the Decada, specifically Book 9, chapters 4 through 7. An Italian translation of that Decada was published in 1504, confirms that Angahira had seen the manuscript in Spain before that date. Las Casas also saw the manuscript in Spain, driven by the noble effort to gather whatever information might serve his defense. He extracted from Ramon Pane's accounts about the Taino beliefs in chapters that he summarizes in 120, 166, and 167 of his Apologetica Historia. The account was included in its totality in chapter 61 of the Historia del Almirante Don Cristobal Colón por su hijo Don Fernando. Fernando's work, written in Spanish, was still unpublished when he died in 1539. Alfonso de Ula translated it into Italian, and this whole version was published in Venice in 1571. But after that date, nothing further had been heard of either Pane's manuscript or Fernando's. And as a result, all we know of the account accredited to Pane at present is Angahira's summary in Latin, Las Casas extract in Spanish, and Ulla's Italian translation. So from Jose Juan Arrom, what we know of Pane's manuscript, we get from the result of Peter Martier's summary in Latin, Las Casas extract in Spanish, and Alfonso de Ulla's translation of Ramon Pane's text. Okay, so all of these things together is what we know of Ramon Pane's account. So essentially, when you look into this book, it opens into the world of the Taino worldview. Okay, and what it does, it goes into the genesis of Taino culture. Okay, which opens into how they view the Taino world in a superficial sense, and then the most important part is the migration story. So the migration story is pretty much, you know, as I said earlier, it's about tribal fissure and separation and the genesis of Taino society on the islands. Now the credit for this goes to Jerry Roman, because he made a good point about that. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. One of the best examples is comparing the Wahayona story. The Wahayona story can be compared with two Warao narratives, one Komatari, the first medicine man, and Tobacco for the first spy. Another one is a Lacono narrative of the story of Anawanili, and we can use one among the Kalinago, the narrative of Hiali. So those things, those stories, you can get a better idea of the Wahayona story. Now with the four brothers and the creation of the sea, that also has to do with the genesis of Taino culture, tribal migration, separation, marriage, kingship, and all of that stuff. And dealing with the practices of the medicine men. A lot of it has a southern swag. And at the end of this, we have where many of the natives was converted to become Christians. And one of the martyrs, Juan, who early in the account was called Watikaba, okay? He became the first martyr, okay? Some of the natives took it as a form of betrayal, being converted, and he was killed. And Watikaba was probably one of the natives who helped Ramon Pane compose these stories together. So as it can also be a possibility that these stories was composed by the natives, but just Ramon Pane is given the credit for the work. So closing out, in my opinion, the best way to study an account of the Antiquities of the Indians is to use the book edited by Angel Rodriguez Alvarez, Mitologia, Taino or Eyeri, and the Relacion of the Antiquities of the Indians. That book has a lot of comparative text, taken directly from the chronicles, from people such as Peter Martier, Las Casas and Fernandez de Oviedo. Okay, that's a very good book because it has a lot of comparative sources that you can use, which is in both Spanish and English, to help you to understand in a comprehensible sense this account. Okay. This book here has a lot of footnotes by Juan Arrom. Juan Arrom did a good job in comparing, but if you're reading this for the first time, a person who is unaware of that area, of this area of study, will have a difficult time understanding this. It will take you a few books just to get a glimpse into what is Ramon Pane is talking about. So this is my take for today, and I hope you use the two sources that I mentioned in this video to get a grounded understanding in regards to the Taino world view. And until the next build, Darienku Batibu Aluka, Taino Ayuboka.